Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation to ISFB. It's not the first time in Bonn, and I will surely come back again. And before I start my own speech, I would just make some remarks on what you just said, Mr. Ambassador, because I think it's a good introduction to what I wanted to say here. You said that the breach between Europe and the US doesn't make sense, and I totally agree, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. And I think this is very important to acknowledge, because we have to prevent that it's going to happen, and at the same time prepare ourselves for it to happen. And I would say that it is already happening in a certain way. And this is because the United States, they are at the center of all the crises that we are summarizing in the poly-crisis debate. And they are not in the center of this crisis as a victim, maybe not as a perpetrator also, but at least as a very important part of the problems that we are facing. And, well, you said autocrats are not in power forever, Mr. Ambassador. We don't know, because this is also the first time in human history that we have a long phase of democracies that are evolving and developing well, and then all of a sudden, these democracies have big problems inside and outside. So we don't know if this is true forever. What do I mean by polycrisis? And I don't want to talk longish about this because everybody knows it, but just to make a little summary of it. Of course, we have a crisis of international law, the biggest in decades, I'd say. We also have a crisis of humanitarian aid, which is shaping conflicts among the among the continents. We also have a big crisis of the prohibition of the use of force. It hasn't always been like it is written in the Charter, I know, but at the moment we really see a big, big crisis. And you mentioned what is going on in the Middle East. I think this is probably the most devastating situation at all. We have a climate crisis, we have the crisis of democracies, and I just added the crisis of knowledge also to my notes, because we really have a crisis of knowledge, and there also the US is a bit of in the center, and I'm still waiting for all the researchers coming from the US to make their research here. We had a lot of announcement from policymakers that they're gonna be invited. I don't see them yet, they should come. We should pay for that, not the Mexicans. And maybe we are also having an economic crisis ahead of us. So it is really a troublesome time, and sometimes I regret that I do not observe the crisis, but I'm in the parliament right now and have to tackle this because it's much easier to observe. But now I can observe with you together. And the very obvious analysis I would like to start with is that Pax Americana is over. 3 or 4 years ago, when the full-scale invasion started against Ukraine, or maybe when we go a bit further even, and the collapse of Kabul in Afghanistan, I'd say, oh, this is a critical moment in the history of Pax Americana, because maybe it is going to collapse. And now, in 2025, I'd say Pax Americana is over. The US doesn't have the strength anymore to make states do what they want to do in order to establish a global order that may not be just, but is a bit stable and less violent than what we are seeing at the moment. And again, the fact that Israel's leader is not coerced efficiently by the President of the United States of America is the most important symbol of this losing from the US administration. And I agree that this is mainly because of a lack of toolbox and diplomatic professionalism. And we saw this already in Afghanistan, where the Taliban took over. They were winning the war against NATO. And this was also, again, when Trump was in the administration, a lack of diplomatic professionalism. So Pax Americana is over, very obvious analysis. In my view, please challenge me. Second, quite obvious analysis, because the question was Germany's security policies in the age of polar crisis, and I'm very glad that you said a bit Germany and Europe. She's going to talk about Europe, because I'm going to talk about Europe, of course. Because there is no Germany in this dramatic shift in the geopolitical sphere. There is no such thing as Germany. Doesn't mean that Germany is unimportant or is not a powerful state and so on, but if we want to look at an entity that has something to say in this shifting situation, we have to look at Europe. If we are constantly looking to Germany, we will just be overflown by the developments in the world. And this is probably the thing that embarrasses me the most. Not everybody has understood yet that we should look to Brussels much more often and also to other European partners and try to have a common perspective on what is going on in the world and how we as Europe have to prepare for the changes that are coming and the crisis that we are already facing today. And the third quite obvious analysis is that soft power cannot balance hard power. I know all the debates about soft power, and then we have a lot of definition questions, but you know what I mean, okay? When I say soft power is not going to balance hard power, and Europe had to learn that now for a very long time, and this is how I grew up, how I was socialized in the academic field also. People told me, yes, but we have soft power. That's also very good. And I'm telling you, yes, it's nice to have, and it's also necessary. We also need this soft power, much more than many people think. But if we are not having hard power, we are depending on the United States or other actors, or on the goodwill of people who have a lot of hard power and who want to invade our countries. So this is the third, probably most obvious analysis, but yeah, I wanted to start with that. The more complicated part of the analysis is that we need a holistic approach to security, and that hard power alone will also be powerless. Because if we do not have the moral strength and the economic strength and the political strength and the knowledge base in order to face these crises ahead of us or where we are already in the middle of this crisis, all the hard power will just fade away. And the funniest thing I was reading about it in the last months was an analysis of our Foreign Intelligence Service, BND, who described why the climate crisis is a threat to national security. So if somebody asks me as a Green politician, how comes that you are so close nowadays to the National Intelligence Service, to the Foreign Intelligence Service? Oh, they're getting closer to us as well. So this is a development that I really appreciate, and it shows that everybody, even the BND, has understood that we need a holistic approach to security. And what I mean by that is that we look at all the crises, how they evolve together, how they are depending each other, and how we cannot try to solve one crisis and neglecting the other crisis in the same time. Because this is a discourse that we are having right now in Europe, right? And even within Germany, and even within my party, don't tell anybody. But the idea that you could tackle climate crisis and then the war will be over. Nobody says it like this, but there is this idea that you should focus on certain crises because they are more important than other crises. And I'd say, as they are all interlinked, we have to tackle them all together. We cannot make a hierarchy between them. If we do that, we will fail on many fronts and also spend a lot of money on things that won't work out. The second point I want to make, who is a bit more complicated, is that we have to make it fast better than doing it very, very right. I mean, I'm 38 years old now. I became member of parliament when I was 34. This is only 4 years. Everything has changed, and things are going to change even more quickly. So if we are writing now the concepts, who will be put in place in 35, the war is already over. I truly believe that we do not have the time to 29, and we do not have the time to even no longer. So if we are writing good papers and have a nice idea how, from the scratch, we should tackle all the crises, all the different, the security crisis, the knowledge crisis, and so on, then we won't, because we don't have the time, and things are slipping out of our hands at the moment. I feel like this. So the European Union and also Germany, on paper, we are on our way, right? On paper, we are. We have the NATO strategic concept, we have the European strategic compass, we have a national strategic strategy. All of them, NATO, European Union, and Germany, very broad definition of security. They are all talking about the climate crisis, they are all talking about societal resilience, they are talking about hard security. It's not like this is now there, right? On paper, we are really very good, but we don't have the time. And I think that's why we need solutions that may not be very just, perfectly functioning, but that just are quick and easy to install with the reality that we are having right now. And it is not so easy, because sometimes also for the green movement where I'm coming from, that is looking at ecological crisis, even within the climate and the ecological crisis, sometimes you can make decisions that are very quick and then they are helpful, but then you have other problems emerging. So, for example, what trees to plant in the forest? Should they adapt to the climate that we have in 15 years? But then we would invite species from different continents, and then we have other problems. I think if we are continuing to discuss these things all the time, things will just evolve, and we will not get ahead of our own policies in the future. So I would say that in substance, because the question was if Germany is awake at last, and the short answer is no. I don't think so, to be honest. Germany has been very slow, and I just want to give you some examples of my own experience in the parliament in Berlin. The first is that in the budget discussions for the budget of 23, it was the parliament who had to force the government to plan enough money in the budget for ammunition. Can you imagine? We didn't have the plan to buy a lot of ammunition for the German Bundeswehr for 23 unless the parliament told the government, please spend more. A spoiler, we never do that. The parliament never tells the government to spend more on the armed forces, never. It didn't happen before. So it was us who had to force the government to do it, so nobody was awake then. Second, it's 2025, everybody knows that for our industry, for our wealth, not only the arms industry, other parts of the industry as well, we need some kind of raw material strategy, right? And until today, we do not have an updated raw material strategy in Germany. It's 2025. And there have been negotiations in the former government. It was the Liberal Party who blocked it in the end, because the other parties wanted to spend a little bit of money for the strategy to be practically possible, right? And it was blocked because, no, this has to be the liberal market to just make things happen. So I'm really shocked still when I think about it. We do not have a national national anti-economic coercion instruments. We do have European anti-coercion instruments now. They haven't been applicated yet. People are discussing it. In Germany, we don't have that at all. Nobody thinks about this kind of resilience. And every week, also when I'm going around in my constituency or here in Northern Westphalia, and I'm speaking to businessmen and women, they tell me about what is already happening in their field, coming from China, all these dumping policies and so on, in order to reduce the economic strength of German businesses, right? It's already happening. We don't have a strategy against it. We don't have instruments against it. We don't even acknowledge that this is happening. So I don't think Germany is awake. We have a backlash on climate policy with the new government. You all know that. We're going to buy a lot of gas again. Well, doesn't sound very futuristic to me, to be honest. Also for geopolitical reasons. We have no strategy for economic diversification. I mean, we still believe that we can rely on our car industry with fossil engines. Doesn't sound very futuristic to me, to be honest. This is not what is going to happen. China is way ahead of us. We are leading. We are not leading anymore in the sector. And also in the European Union, we do not have a European Union-Australia trade agreement. We do not have a European Union-India trade agreement. It doesn't happen. So all these practical things that you could do, you should do in order to tackle the crisis, people keep talking about it, but it's not done. And I cannot explain this, but with a lack of comprehension of the very bold and brutal changes we are already going through. It must be ignorance. Everything else would be even worse, I think. Yes, your moral has already eroded, so I'm sorry for that. But Mr. Ambassador, you were speaking about credibility as well. I think we have to, and this is my sixth analysis, and the third one I think is a bit more complicated. We have to shape the narratives of what the future global order without polycrisis or less effects of this crisis should look like. We have to draw a picture of the future that everybody, us, the leaderships, the populations, on the whole planet, if I may say so, could look forward to and say, okay, this is what we want to achieve together as humanity. This is very hippie-esque now, I know, but I'm from the Green Party. I'm allowed to be a bit hippie-esque. And what we are not doing right now in Europe, and we are not doing right now in Germany, and also not in the US, is shaping these narratives. We are not even talking about this future. And even less, we are acting in a way that you could picture this bright future for humanity. And this is, I think, the worst thing, and we really need these pictures, because otherwise the moral will erode dramatically, and not only between the states, and coercion and confrontation will not only become a more relevant form of interaction between the states, but also within our societies. And you mentioned this already for the United States, it's already true. And other countries in Europe, we have that as well. Violence is on the rise, partly. And this is, I think, a real danger for what we have achieved in the past decades as democracies. And I want to give you one example of, I call it now the hypocrisy of the West. I know it's very blunt, and of course it's not true, but it's so close to my heart in this case that I have to be, I have to exaggerate here a bit. I was speaking about the end of the Pax Americana probably being named later by the historians with the defeat of NATO in Kabul against Taliban. What has happened since is even more dramatic on a moral side, because the German government has decided that they want so badly get rid of some dozen Afghan nationals who were criminals here in Germany, that they made a deal with the devil, with the Taliban regime itself. So imagine being a soldier who served maybe several years even, among those 19 years that German soldiers served in Afghanistan. And the enemy has always been Taliban. And now the Taliban is invited. They get the building from the former Afghan Republic in Berlin. They could even put their flag on it, the same flag that has been the flag of the enemy for 19 years in Afghanistan from NATO troops. And now all the Afghan nationals, several hundred thousands in Germany, I think, all their personal data is handed over to the Taliban. Can you imagine? This is what is happening right now. And imagine that we would do the same with Russia, and given all the data from the Russian nationals who are in the opposition in exile here, maybe in Germany or in European countries, and say, look, that's where they live. Go ahead, do what you want to do. This is what is happening right now. And for me, it is really embarrassing to see that nobody understands the geopolitical impacts of this, because it says so loud, we don't have a clue what our values are at all. And this is only one example out of many. But we also have good examples for moral. I have been to Ukraine, end of August, and this is making the last point before I try to talk a bit about the solutions. And I met a man who was my age. He told me that at a charity event, he told me that he founded a charity organization for internally displaced people in Ukraine to provide them with humanitarian aid and so on, and labor opportunities, blah, blah, blah. And then he showed me some videos of him laying on the rooftop of the skyscrapers in Kiev, wearing a uniform, and being equipped with a machine gun, and he was shooting down the drones. So he was part of the last layer in Kiev. There are about 500 people on a voluntary basis. They are shooting down everything that they can shoot down with this very simple equipment, right? And I asked him, yeah, well, but what did you do before you were a soldier and you had this NGO working for internally displaced people? He said, no, I did what I still do as a job. I sell chocolate. And can you imagine that this is like, how much energy can you have as a person to do your regular job from Monday to Friday, to then be a CEO of an NGO that deals with internally displaced people, and then at the weekend, you are part of the defense of your country. And I think that this shows that there are still people out there who believe in democracy, who believe in human rights and rule of law, in freedom. And it's those people who are fighting against, not only symbolically, but physically, against the authoritarian ideas of a different world order. And I think he should be an example for all of us concerning the mindset. Because, of course, you could say, Well, but that's not very efficient to lay on the rooftop in Kiev and shoot them down with your gun. Yeah, but that's what he can do. And maybe you could say, well, the internally displaced people around Kiev, they should have a home right now, because after 3 years, why they are still living in difficult situations. Yeah, but this is what we can do right now. And also, of course, the chocolate is fair trade and organic, so he's also working on the climate and the other crisis, right? So he made himself part of the solution on many fronts, I'd say. And I think this is what we also have to do as policymakers, as academics, to think about how can we become part of the solution, how can we help others to become part of the solution as well. But I would like to focus on what politics should do, because I'm a politician, so I won't give you homework, but me. The first thing is, I think we have to massively invest in science, and I really mean it. The crisis of knowledge is probably the most silent one, but the one that has the most dramatic outcomes already today. And I say this, for example, I mean, you all know what I'm talking about, but I have been in a class of 16-year-old yesterday, and among 30 students, 2 of them said that they are consuming news at all. 2 of them are informed about what is going on in the world, and 1 of them does it with foreign media. And there was only 1 person among about 30 who is consuming German news. Can you imagine that? And this is what the journalists have to do, but the science also must, research also must be supported much more, because without knowledge, none of the crises can be understood or tackled. And I mean, it has always been like this. This is very easy to say in this room. There's a lot of professors, you all know that. But are we all fighting enough for this idea? Are we all fighting enough for the resources that the scientific community needs in order to tackle the crisis? I don't think so, to be honest. I hear a lot of I cannot see, you are whiny, right? And then it's a bit too bright. But I hear a lot of criticism about we should get more funding. It's not very good that the German government doesn't support us enough. There's too much influence from the politicians towards scientific community, and all of this is true. But where is the rebellion in the scientific community? I don't see it. Because it's so close to the government very often. And I really would like to see more of an inner sovereignty to ask for this freedom of science, yes. Here, it's written very easy. We need a more political scientific community. But also states need to make it easier to be engaged and to get more people, to make more people become part of the solution. And we are now having a debate about whether we should force young people into the arms troop, but we never have this debate about what do we need in our daily life in order to be able to be benevolent in order to tackle these crises, ecological crisis, society crisis, security crisis, and so on. So we really have to change this debate about this. Summary. You are stressing me out with the minute, I'm sorry. Germany is not awake. I'm sorry, I'm still shouting at Germany in order to make it become awake. And investing in hard power will only be enough to tackle the proxy crisis if we also invest in the people. And by the people, I mean those people who know things and those people who do things. And mostly in those people who know things and do things. Thank you very much.